Can Clemson stay undefeated in the first month of college football? We'll talk about that and more right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Clemson, Locked On Clemson, your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're new to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You know how we do it here on Locked On. Exclusive Clemson content, Monday through Friday, every single week. And in between episodes, you can follow me over on X, at The Morgan T Show, where I talk about all things Clemson whenever, however you want. Coming up on today's show, Clemson's path to a perfect season starts with month one and really starts with the biggest game of the season, or at least one of the bigger games of the college football season, and that is against highly ranked and extremely hungry for a starting win or a first opening game win, and that is LSU. The Tigers versus the Tigers. Thankfully, though, it'll be in Clemson Memorial Stadium, and there'll be a debate over who has the biggest who has the original Death Valley or the real Death Valley. So we'll get to see that from a Clemson perspective first. Clemson LSU starting out actually August 30th. But, you know, when we get closer and closer to the season, I like to look at some predictions and what ifs, kind of that's to give you an idea of what's going on in my head with college football. And what I like to do is kind of start with Clemson because I know Clemson the most, and then work my way out throughout the ACC to kind of see what our competition possibly will be as we go throughout the season. Now, we know Clemson has a great chance to be in the college football playoffs. They have a great chance to be in the ACC championship game. And they have a great chance, in my opinion, to kind of start out the season with some early season buzz with that first game of the season against LSU. I mean, it's going to be a difficult matchup to start things out. I mean, anytime you have to open up a game like that, you don't get any do-overs. And Clemson has, as we know, struggled at the beginning of the season with these harder matchups. Now, LSU has also had difficulties with what I would arguably say is less challenging of an opening matchup than say Georgia that Clemson has, but both teams are really looking to get back on track in the opening game of the seasons. And this one is tough because it is an extremely difficult game, really, from both perspectives. Now, depending on who you talk to, if you're a Clemson fanboy, you're probably saying, oh, this is going to really show LSU what Death Valley, the real Death Valley, is all about. And coming to Clemson is going to be difficult to win, and Brian Kelly's not going to be able to have any answers for Dabo Swinney's squad. I can believe that in a lot of ways. Also, if you're on the LSU side, you're saying, hey, we got a lot of new guys, but they're also very talented, and they're going to show up and show out quickly and show Clemson fans what the real Death Valley is all about, what the real Tigers are all about. So there's a huge debate between the two teams, and I love it. I'm here for it. This is what college football really is all about, is this matchup and the debate that we're having. Now, the thing is, when you look at the schedule outside of that, you kind of start there and you think, well, that is the most difficult game, at least for Clemson. I won't really look into LSU because that's not an ACC team, but for Clemson, that game is the one. If you can get by that, the other ones are going to be easier, in my opinion, but not necessarily the easiest in the world. The schedule gives them a little bit better, I would say less heavyweights. Maybe that's not a heavyweight matchup after that. So after LSU, let's say Clemson gets through that, they get to stay at home and face the Troy Trojans. Now, Troy, sometimes they can sneak up on you quick. They've not always been an easy out. Clemson played them, I think, in 2015 when Deshaun Watson had them, and they were able to ultimately go very far that season. But You would assume that afternoon game against Troy the next weekend would be one where you could kind of take a sigh of relief and get you a W. If you didn't beat LSU, you'd get your first W of the season. If you did beat LSU, then you just keep rolling it and keep it downhill. So let's say that the best of the best case scenario happens for Clemson. I could easily see them winning both those games and going into September 2-0, in the middle of September 2-0. And the main reason why I have a lot of confidence in Clemson is the fact that they have 80+% returning production from 2024. I mean, a roster with experience in this day and age of college football, and the fact that Clemson is recruiting at a high level. So it's not just a roster of guys that can't compete or aren't the best players out there, or some of the best players out there. So they're returning guys that they trust, that they know, that they've developed, and that are, were good recruits to begin with. So I think this is where Clemson continues to push towards being one of the best teams in the country in September. So I'm, again, just to kind of give you a little thought, I'm looking at just September here. And I count August because obviously you got to get through August to play September. But I am worried about at Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Now, Syracuse is at home, but I know Fran Brown is looking, and he is going to have his friend or his team hyped up for this game against Clemson to kind of get a little bit of payback, if you will. I don't know if you'd necessarily call it payback, maybe just some collecting the check of allowing or coming back on Miami down by 21 points. And they came back on Miami and beat Miami and allowing Clemson to get to the ACC championship game. So there's going to be like some rent due mentality, I think, from Syracuse. And Georgia Tech, they've progressively got better year over year. Haynes King is a guy who nearly beat Georgia. He should have beat Georgia last season. It was a heartbreaker at the end, but he's going to be somebody who kind of fights to the very end. He is not going to give up. It just depends on how much the talent gap is there between Clemson and Syracuse, and Clemson and Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech will be the away game. So the good thing is you've got 4 games from the beginning of the season, or the first month of the season. 3 of those games are at home. And then your last week of September is a bye week. So you should finish September. Worst case scenario, we could go down a rabbit hole of they lose to Georgia Tech, or they have slip up against Syracuse, and they also lose to LSU. I mean, it's not unlikely that you could lose 2 games in September or the first month of the season, but I'm going to lean in on the fact that Death Valley and that crowd and that defensive front is going to smother LSU, stop the inside run game, get to Garrett Nussmeier quickly, and not allow him to just pick you apart in the passing game. So I'm thinking that the defensive front is going to get to Nussmeier quickly. The Clemson fan base is going to disrupt Nussmeier and LSU. And that big nighttime game to start the season is going to end up with a Clemson winning that game and being thrust into the forefront of the national media for being the best team in the country. So I think that is kind of how Clemson starts, and then it rolls from there, where Garrett Riley starts to show us the ultimate playbook. Everything kind of comes out to fruition with what Garrett Riley has built on year over year. And I think Troy and Georgia Tech is really where Garrett Riley's offense can shine. And then Syracuse is kind of solidifying that, hey, this team is a legit team. They've gotten through an away game now. They've gotten through a return game, kind of a payback type game. And the stars for Clemson, like Peter Woods, CJ Parker, are going to kind of rise up and really meet the occasion for the beginning of the season. So I'm going to lean on, and I know this is probably going to call me a homer here, but I'm leaning more towards Clemson making their way through September as an undefeated team, 4-0, and unblemished And clearly in the ACC title picture, they would have 2 ACC wins, 1 SEC win, and right up there in the top 5 of the country with the best teams in the country. So that's my prediction. I hate to I don't want to jinx anything, but I could definitely see that happening. Now, again, I'm going to play devil's advocate in my own head here, and worst case scenario could happen. But I think Clemson, with those returning starters, with the weapons that Cade Klubnik has around him, with the enhancements that they've made to the defense over the offseason, Clemson should and has a great opportunity to start September or the first month of the season 4-0, undefeated, moving into 2 road games in October against North Carolina and Boston College, and then a revenge game against SMU in October. Now, next episode, I will get into October, so we'll hold here at September. And I wanted to transition to something I don't do much on this show. I always talk about Clemson a lot and Clemson's opponents, but I wanted to look at September's as a whole for the ACC and what other teams could possibly be up there as an undefeated team as well through September. So we'll talk about that in segment 2. What are the 2 other teams that I think could be undefeated in September for the ACC? Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor to your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the court or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. A few summers back, I played 18 with some friends, and they challenged me to get closest to the pin, and I was just struggling to get through. I didn't sleep well the night before, and it was just rough. I had a lot going on, and to get me through that back 9, I had to grab me a 5-Hour Energy. I keep one in my golf bag all the time now because of that, just to keep you going. You never know when you need it. Golf is all about good times and good people, good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse to go without chasing down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive $20 off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Continuing with our ACC football preview, I talked a lot about Clemson and how much I feel confident with them going into September and being undefeated. You can let me know what you think in the comments over on YouTube, or reach out to me over on X at the Morgan T Show about what you think, if I'm crazy or not. But there are other teams too that I think are in the race for being undefeated in September, and 2 teams that I think really, one, I think a lot of people are going to be talking about, and 2, one I think they'll be talking about once you see the season start. One of those teams that I think everybody is already high on is Louisville. But the other team that I think people are going to build their hype on is Duke. So not a team that you typically remember growing up being a football powerhouse, but Duke has done the little things incrementally better year over year, and they have a good schedule to kind of start them out. I believe undefeated as well. These 2 teams can sprint out the gate for the ACC, and you would be looking at, based on the other teams and my thought process, just skimming through win-losses, I could see Duke being undefeated. I could see Louisville being undefeated. The other teams, I really lean more towards the fact that they would be one loss, Duke's 2025 schedule, Elon, I think that's a win. Now, Illinois is going to be a big-time matchup, but they get to play that at home. So I lean towards Duke being at home, even though, nobody's really thought that Wallace Wade Stadium is kind of a huge home field advantage. But I do believe I have some faith in Duke and what they're able to do and what Mensa is able to do from a quarterback perspective as well. And then they get at Tulane and NC State. Now, those are going to be difficult games as well, but I kind of am high on Duke right now. I don't really know what I'm going to get from NC State. I don't really know what I'm going to get at Tulane. That's going to be a difficult away game. But I could definitely see Duke shocking the nation and winning these 2 games, or winning those 3 games through September, and then finishing up with Syracuse as well. So they're going to have 5 games by the time you get done with the month. And, I could see them being 5-0. Duke was one of the bigger surprises in the Power Four last season. Manny Diaz gets a second year, to go at it. They've been recruiting well. I think they brought in 2 top 100 recruits. They've never done that in the past. So their first ever big time recruits coming into the team. You've got a top ranked quarterback transfer. You've got a veteran offensive line. You have, he's going to have a stout defense. And even though when I look at the schedule on the surface, I think there's no way they make it through this undefeated. And that may be true. They could have 1 loss, and they definitely could have more than 1 loss, honestly. But this one's going to be more of a reach for me. But I do feel as if I'm kind of high on what Manny Diaz is doing and what Duke is doing. And I think overall their schedule is pretty favorable as the season continues as well, to get some of the lower teams in the ACC overall. That they do have to face Duke. They do have to face Syracuse, like I mentioned, but the rest of the teams are late in the season, November, October, are definitely beatable ACC teams for Duke. So even if they scuff their knee a little bit at the beginning of the season and don't do what I'm, predicting here, they still could have a great season where they're one of the better teams in the ACC. So don't be shocked if I'm crazy here, but maybe I'm crazy and I'm right. So don't be shocked if you hear this or see this actually happen, because you shouldn't be shocked, because, I told you here first on Locked On Clemson that it could happen. The other team that I could see, that this one you probably lean a little bit more at agreeing with me on, other than Duke, is Louisville. Their 2025 schedule looks really good for me. I like Eastern Kentucky. I think they're going to beat them. That's a win to start the season, August 30th. James Madison on a Friday night. It is in Louisville, so to me, give me Louisville there. James Madison on a Friday night, not an easy game by any means. That's a tricky one. Then they have an off week, so they get a break right at the beginning of the season. They'll be 2-0 in my opinion. Then they'll go to Bowling Green. They're going to be 3-0 there, and they'll get at Pitt, which could be a difficult matchup too. But I think I lean more on Louisville and Miller Moss and him being a better quarterback for that team. So I would lean on who has the better quarterback there, and I'm going to go with Louisville to win that game. So they will be 4-0 finishing up September, and Duke could possibly be up there 4-1 or 5-0 as well if my prediction holds strong. So you could see some of the top teams in the ACC being Clemson, Duke, and Louisville. Tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely losing my mind here. I think you probably agree with me more on the Louisville front than anything else. But Darian Mensah, to me, I love the guy. Jeff Brom and what he's going to be able to do with Miller Moss, I love that option as well. Both teams should have an improved defense, in my opinion, a veteran defense and a solid, offensive line that you can trust as well. Their lines of scrimmage should be able to hold up, and their quarterback should be able to out quarterback the other teams across from them. So that's what I'm kind of going with too, as well. Hot starts aren't uncommon for teams, and then they fizzle out. That's for sure. I'm not really super interested in Clemson or any of these teams starting out hot and then fizzling. It seems like the ACC typically does that. As we mentioned, even Jim Phillips talked about how he wants to represent the ACC and back up the conference, but it's difficult to do when you finish the season 2-11 in bowl games. So while I'm bragging on these teams to begin the season, I'd much rather have stronger bowl seasons from the ACC. I'd much rather have teams that can sustain success. Out of all the teams in the ACC, I'm still leaning towards Clemson being that main team that can sustain success throughout the season because of all the returning pieces that they have and all the stars that they have on the team, that all the talent they have on the team, and just their experience with getting deep into the postseason that they've had from the previous couple of seasons. So I'm leaning more on Clemson finishing the season stronger than these teams, but Clemson has to face Duke. They have to face Louisville. And to start the season out, they're going to all look very strong, in my opinion. Let me know what you think over on YouTube, or you can message me over on X to tell me if I'm crazy or not. But this is just me kind of at a glance giving you my quick opinion on the first month for the ACC, who could be doing well and who could be struggling. You know, when I think about teams that could be struggling, if you were to ask me that, I think maybe like California. You know, I think they're going to still have a hard time winning a lot of games in the ACC. Virginia, I think, is going to have a hard time. You know, I'm not really sure what we're going to get from Stanford or Pittsburgh to start the season off as well. And I am curious of how like teams like Florida State are going to do against Alabama, or SMU is going to have to do against non-conference opponents, North Carolina against their non-conference opponent. I believe they play Central Florida. So Syracuse with Tennessee, that's going to be a tough one. There's going to be a lot of early losses for these teams that are just kind of mid of the pack or bottom of the ACC. And it's going to be kind of starting off slow, in my opinion, for some of these teams. So highlighting the best teams to start us off, Clemson, Duke, and Louisville are ones that I'm kind of high on right now. We'll finish up the show talking about some of the players that you should hear from in 2025 from the ACC. There'll be a handful of stars that break out every single season for the ACC, and especially during the first month, I think there's a few names that we'll probably hear more than others. These early games really depend on individual matchups, opponents' ability to get ready quickly and study film and be able to amp up in the fall practice in August, like to the very beginning of their season in September. So how well they can prepare, because once you get in the season, you know, you don't have many days before you prepare for the next team. So there's a quick turnaround once you get everything rolling. But the very first game of the season and then rolling into the second one, you have a little bit more preparation time than the rest of the season. But I think there are a few athletes that you will definitely hear from. And really, I'm a huge quarterback guy, so I probably am quarterback heavy on this list. You can tell me if you think there's anybody that I'm missing. But when I think about who will be the star players to start out the first month from the ACC, so right out the gate, my first thought is Cade Klubnik. If he has a huge game against LSU, which I'm hoping he does, then he's got to be the front runner for the Heisman to start the season out. And that's kind of what we're hoping as Clemson fans from the very beginning. If he's really gotten to a point where he's cleaned everything up and he's the most mature he's been and he's in the best shape of his life, this is a contract year for him to get into the first round of the NFL draft. And kind of crazy to think that Cade Klubnik, if you're the best quarterback in the country, you're going to be a first rounder. And if he has the ability to take that next step, then he will definitely be that. I've already mentioned him during the show as well, Darian Mensah from Duke, or at Duke now. His ability to convert third downs, third down and long, second down and long into manageable third downs, manageable conversion downs, fourth downs, even keeping drives alive. His dual threat ability for Mensa, to me, I'm excited to see in the ACC. He has a really good passing completion percentage too, as well. And he's very young. So I can see him continuing to develop and grow in 2025. So if I'm going to say Duke is going to have a chance to be undefeated through the first month and they have a difficult schedule, it will all be on the back of Darren Mensa. So that's my first thought there too. Now, again, Louisville, I put on my list, and Miller Moss is all over my list. I know he's kind of been a little bit of a disappointment, but I think under Jeff Brom, head coach there at Louisville, he's going to be the QB whisperer and get him to settle in and make the decisions needed to keep that tempo going with Louisville and, keep that ball moving. I really feel like Louisville could have a very lethal offense this season, building on what they did from last season. There'll be a difficult game for Clemson because they got to play them on Friday night at their house. So Louisville has a good chance of having a great season in 2025 and along with Duke. And it really all hinges on for me on those quarterbacks. So Cade Klubnik, Mensa, Miller Moss, I put him on the list, but I'm still not very sure about Carson Beck. I'm not sure what we're going to get from him, but if he comes in poised, has the arm strength back to 100%, makes the throws that he needs to make, he could have a lot of yards in just 1 month, and he could put Miami in an early spot to make a huge statement for the ACC and in the national media as well. So I don't know if he will have a huge start to the season, but if he does, he'll be one of those players of name that the media will jump to quickly. So I could definitely see Carson Beck from Miami hopping up on the news headlines as well. Another guy that I had on my list here was actually from Florida State, but not a quarterback, because I don't know how I feel about Tommy Castellanos. Will he help Florida State be better or not? I don't know. But Darnell Jackson Jr., senior now, redshirt senior, I could see him. He's going to kind of anchor that interior, that nose tackle of Florida State. I could see him anchoring that front and, really opening some eyes. Maybe he won't show up on the stat sheet as much, but to me, I could see him having a breakout season as well and produce a lot of sacks, or at least produce a lot of opportunities for those other guys around him to get in and get some sacks. So maybe Florida State's defensive front improves significantly from 2024 to 2025. So he's another name that I just kind of looked at on trying not look at a Clemson player, but looking at a defensive player. But I do want to throw in another Clemson player if I have to, and that's a guy I talked about yesterday, which is Tyler Brown. The fact that Cade Klubnik bragged about him so much during the ACC media days, and the fact that he's back and healthy, I feel like there's something to that. I don't think that's just a bunch of smoke. I know Clemson has a lot of lethal wide receivers, but Tyler Brown was just so dependable for Clemson and for Cade Klubnik. I have to feel like when he's back out on the field, he's kind of that go-to guy to continue to move the chains. When you need to have a third down conversion, I have this feeling that Tyler Brown's going to start showing up more quickly at the beginning of the season for 2025. He's still very young, but he seems to just be on the right page. And him and Cade Klubnik just have a really good in-sync timing together. So it's something that we've missed in 2024 that I feel like there's a little bit more to it. And I know we want to brag about all those other wide receivers, but there's just something that's telling me that Tyler Brown is going to have a good start to the season in 2025. So those are just a couple of names from the top players in the ACC that I was kind of skimming through the rosters out there just to kind of see who I thought might be good for 2025. Another guy too for FSU, Deuce Robinson. I really wanted him as a recruit for Clemson. I know Clemson talked to him a few times about being a dual threat guy. He's a great baseball player, great basketball player, great football player. He can do literally everything, and he could be their number one guy all around. So Castellanos, just get him the ball and let him work with it. I'd be curious to see what he does in 2025 as well. He could jump out and be a big impact player for sure for Florida State. But those are some players that I had on my list to kind of circle for the ACC. Let me know what you think. Again, I'm always curious, kind of looking ahead. I always try to look and see what our opponents could be and what the outlook looks like for 2025 and see how we can predict certain things and just kind of look back on it and see if we were right or wrong. Hey, I am not opposed. This is not a hot take segment. This is not a hot take podcast. I really was just trying to throw out some ideas and some thoughts, some preliminary thoughts that I have going into the season as we get closer and closer to August and the beginning of the season. But thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. For your second listen, don't forget to check out the Portal Show over with Brian Smith. He has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan of the college football changes to the landscape of college football. Find the Portal over on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.